Welcome back to the channel, folks. In this video I'm going to show you how I assembled and painted the new plastic PzIV70V from the German Bagration Tank Hunter starter set. I'll be showing a few vehicles from this set, probably just the Tank Hunters, maybe the anti-aircraft. We'll see how time goes. But this starter booklet you get with the box is quite handy for you. It'll help you, if you're unfamiliar with the kits, help you choose the right kind of gun and exhausts and such likes. But always worth checking out, especially when you're dealing with a new kit, because you never know what options there might be on there and what might be of use to you. You're probably familiar with the glues and the tools that we can be using here. I'm using ordinary cement, and for those smaller pieces, extra thin cement, so I've got a mixture of strength and precision where it's needed, and a usual set of tools, which includes a toothbrush just to help brush off all the scrapings and filings of the work that we're doing on the pieces. I normally start my assembly with all the larger hull pieces, the top, bottom, sides, in this case side skirts. Dry fitting is also an important part of the process, guys. Before you dive in and start flinging glue around, just make sure there are no issues that you need to be aware of yourself. And then clean up, very important. Parts will not fit together if you don't have nice smooth components. Get rid of any mold lines at this point as well, and be careful that you don't remove too much. It's very easily done. That's why I don't use a knife which is overly sharp. It doesn't need to be, and that also helps protect your fingers. And then the glue, just be very careful. Draw most of the paint off the brush that you're using here. Otherwise you're going to flood the figure and you're going to get over your fingers, and then it's going to start touching all over the piece, leaving horrible finger marks. And then you've got your thin glue for those little components where you don't need the big thick glue for strength. Having left them to dry for a good couple hours, so there's nothing going to move about when you're handling them, we're ready to start airbrushing. Now I use an airbrush extractor booth. It's something you want to consider yourself if you're airbrushing, especially if you're using Tamiya paint. It'll draw the paint particles out. I use a mask as well. Make sure you've got your extractor going out an open window. The base colour is going to be this new Tamiya, I think it's XF88, which is dark yellow 2, XF64, which is red brown, and then XF58, which is olive green. That is my sort of classic three-tone camo that I like to use. And you can see I've undercoated I've base coated the PzIV70s with the dark yellow 2, so that they're now ready for the first coat of camo colour, and I always start with the brown. Now this part of the tutorial isn't so much a how to airbrush, it's just showing you the kind of shapes that you can create to make an attractive camo in this particular kit as well, because it's quite tricky in that you have to not just airbrush the sides, you've got to keep that pattern going over the top in an attractive way that is going to look well balanced, and that can be quite tricky. When you've got a turret, you can do the hull, put the turret on, and then start all over again in the turret. You've got a bit more control, so think carefully at how you're going to plan your camo, what you're going to use. There's hard edge as well, and I will show that in the Hetzer video, but you've got to think about the size of your lines or blotches and how you're going to take them from the side over the top, and do the same on the other side. And then when you're meeting in the middle, you're going to have a nice balanced amount of main colour and of your first camo colour. Put too much in and there's going to be no space for the olive green. Adding the second camo colour can be quite tricky. This is where you have to keep the right balance. You have to think about particularly how you're carrying the camo lines up the side and over the top, because you might run out of space. If you think you're going to run out of space, reduce the size of your lines. If you think that there's not enough space in a particular area to get two camo colours in, well, maybe overspray the brown a little bit with the green. You don't want to have an area, for instance, on the front plate or on the top plate where there's not a good balance of colours, and that can happen when you start to run out of space. Here I'm getting a nice good balance. Some of the shapes aren't brilliant, but I'm very happy with the balance, and you can see that in the finished look. The lines carry up the sides over onto the top. They look good from sort of tabletop viewing angles. The dark yellow base colours very much still in evidence, and the red, brown and olive green have got a nice contrast against each other to give a good overall classic look that we're after. The next thing I do, and I quite often do this with the tracks separate from the kit, but in this case, because of the way it went together, I really had to put the tracks, glue the tracks in place, just because of the construction of those side skirts. I'm painting the tracks now. I like to get the tracks painted and dry brushed, and then underneath a protective coat of gloss varnish. And I'm using US Olive Drab as a base colour for my tracks. Seems a bit strange, but it's a good earthy kind of colour. And then a dry brush of good old gunmetal grey all over. Then it's tyres. Excuse the pun, but painting tyres can be very tiring. You have to be very careful. You don't want to get in the paint on the side skirts. You want to try and keep it off the wheels, the wheel hubs, and it takes a long time, but a nice finished look is excellent. It's worth the effort. Be patient, folks, and as always, got some tidying up that you have to be doing here, and be careful with the front two wheels, by the way, because they're actually metal. On this type of vehicle, there's no rubber. I've gave the kits a coat of gloss varnish and let that rest for a day so it's nice and solid. And then I'm going to apply a pin wash, as you'll see, with enamel paint. Now there's lots of enamel paints out there. This just happens to be the one I'm using. As long as it's the right colour, it will do. Now you can see it's almost black. I'm not working straight from the pot. I'm taking out enough for me to work with, just using the brush. Clean off the neck of the brush, folks, otherwise you're going to get black fingers. Right, and then stick that lid back on, or you're going to spill that everywhere and it's going to be horrible. Then I've got some thinner, similar kind of product made for enamel washes, and I am going to, this you just got to judge by eye, folks, going to add some to the paint that I've drawn out, and a little well beside that too. Mix it up so I've got a really, really thin wash, and that is going to be able to be applied in a very controlled way that will not ruin your lovely camo by basically painting the tank black. That's a great danger when you are applying washes all over the entire surface. Patience is very much the key here, folks. You can see if you get the right amount of paint onto your brush, just touch it to the feature that you're wanting to shade, the paint will just flow around that feature. More or less, depending on how thin it is, you may have to be adding thinner to your paint as you go. You're more likely to be lifting thinner than, well, the majority of what you'll be lifting will be thinner, not paint, so it'll get darker as you're working down in the little pool of mixed wash that we've made. But you can see you can just touch a feature and then it's shaded. Very little paint is going where we don't want it to go. And if you take your time, maintain control, then the cleanup stage, which is what I'm doing now, will be a lot easier, and there'll be less likelihood of you staining the surface. The gloss paint will allow you to draw the enamel wash off, but it's still going to leave a tiny stain, you know, which if you leave for too long will be darker than the surrounding area, and you don't want that. I always remove the excess wash straight away. You may see other guides suggesting you can remove it after 15 minutes. I'm sure that's fine, but you'll get a brighter finish if you remove it straight away. Just put it on, let it settle, get a bit thinner and draw it off. But then what you need to do is leave it till the next day, or certainly for like 8 hours or so, to allow that enamel to dry completely so we can start highlighting. And I'm going to start the highlighting with what I call the open edges. That's where I can easily draw a brush along edges without much care. To do that, I'm you can see almost bouncing the brush along the edges so that there's not just a straight highlight line. You can highlight the edges just by catching some of the areas, and then it prevents it looking like a neon look. I'm using Iraqi sand here, by the way, folks. And you don't have to use a particularly good well pointed brush for this either. I use a bit of a worn out brush. This still has a good edge, and then I move to a better brush, a sharper brush, just to add in lots of little panel lines around features such as hatches, where you've got to take a bit of care. And the highlighting we've applied there is also the sort of the starting point, the basis where we will work our chips and our scratches from. Chipping and scratching can actually be a very important part of the highlighting process on a vehicle of this size. So you can see, just working the areas on the side that might get drawn along hedges, walls, bushes, trees, and then scratches and chipping around areas that that might be worn, but also they help break up large panels. And then using German Camo black brown, I am adding some sort of dark cores to the larger chips and scratches, mainly on the areas that are showing the dark yellow as opposed to the brown or green. If you've got a very large scratch on those areas, give it a dark core with the German Camo black brown. Otherwise, just leave the dark yellow and you'll get some really nice standout contrasts. We're now ready to work on all the little bits of detail on the tank that's going to really catch the eye. You know, the Pioneer tools, the jack, the spare tyres, all these kind of things. And there can be quite a lot on a German tank. You know, they stuck many things on there. I would just refer you to the description for the colours that I've used. Once again, just take your time, work through it, and you'll soon get some nice eye-catching detail that helps add a lot of character to the finished kit. After all that, we're ready for the final stage. Just having a quick look at where we've got to, and you can see we've got a nice soft camo patina. It's still at the gloss varnish stage, sorry. Some nice shapes all the way around for the camo, but now we just need to add a bit of weathering for it, just to help give it a bit more shape, a bit more depth, and a bit more character. So I'm using enamels again, using a brown wash that, incidentally, I applied that brown wash all over the running gear, like the wheels for the tracks. And we're using a small beat up brush with some thinner as well, just to work with. And we're not going to be using the palette this time, we're going to be working from the neck of the bottles. Working in just a couple of areas at a time. I'm taking some of that paint from the neck of the bottle because it's thicker, and then some thinner, just a tiny bit of thinner. You'll know yourself with practice how much to use. And I'm drawing the little blob of paint down. You notice I'm turning the vehicle up and down, so I'm drawing it one way, drawing it the other way, and it's very important to keep it going vertical. You know, like it's got to look as though gravity is drawing this streak of dirt down the side of the vehicle. And then for variety, I'm going to add some of this dust colour, sorry. And when you're doing this, remember to put the darker streaks down the lighter areas and the lighter streaks down the darker areas. Otherwise, you're not really going to notice them. You're not going to be able to see them. And be careful not to apply too many streaks and get carried away with this whole process. Otherwise, you're going to cover up the camouflage and the shading that you spent so much time working on. We want to create the impression of a weathered, streaky looking vehicle, soften down the panels a bit and the camo a bit, but not go completely into the deep end. And using light mud, PzIV70's light mud, I sprayed on some dust, which gives a really nice defining soft edge to the schurzhen. There you go, folks. There is a completed box set. Platoon of 3 plus company command. Kind of like that. Because I'll be using these, I reckon, as in this combination with a platoon of perhaps Panzer IVs to flesh out the formation without spending too many points. But I think they look really quite attractive. The yellow in this kind of camo can quite often be dominated by the camo colours, but I like the way this is looking. I like this Tamiya dark yellow too. It's a kind of colour I always try to recreate myself by adding buff to the dark yellow colour. Dark yellow 1, I suppose we'll call it. And the weathering is nice and attractive and effective. It helps break up the panels, adds a bit of depth. So there you go, folks. Hopefully you found that useful. Remember, the colours will be in the description below, so check it out. Leave any comments, any questions. Thank you to all the subscribers. And if you've not subscribed yet but would like to, please do so, because it will help me build the channel and bring it to other people who enjoy this hobby. And next up is some Arders. As you can see, I'm pretty far on with these, and I'm working through the video just now, and painting the crew will be next. So stay tuned for that one, folks, and thank you very much for watching.